They laughed when the lawyer handed me a wrinkled envelope. My sister got millions, her husband got estates, and I got a one-way plane ticket to nowhere. The room erupted in mockery, their voices cutting through the polished silence of my grandfather's funeral. But 6 words waited in Montana that would turn their laughter into silence. The rain fell steady and respectful that morning at Arlington, the kind that soaked through your dress shoes without ever announcing itself as a storm. I stood in my army dress uniform, collar pressed sharp, cap angled precisely, watching the honor guard fold the flag with movements rehearsed 1,000 times before. Captain Riley Whitmore, Army Logistics Officer, present and accounted for. It was my grandfather's funeral, but the atmosphere felt closer to a media event than a memorial. Reporters lingered beyond the cemetery gates, their cameras ready. Every time the honor guard shifted position, phones emerged from pockets like this was a performance staged for an audience. My sister Sabrina stood across the grave in a black designer dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my housing allowance. Her husband, Cole Bennett, held an umbrella over her head with the careful attention of someone protecting royalty. They looked like they'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine spread. The beautiful heiress and her handsome executive husband united in elegant grief. People whispered their names as they passed. Sabrina Whitmore Bennett, Cole Bennett. Dunn Defense Logistics, our family's defense contracting company, had made enough headlines that they'd become minor celebrities in certain circles. Faces people recognized at charity galas and industry conferences. I didn't hate them. That would have required more emotional energy than I was willing to spend. I'd simply stopped trying to understand them years ago, stopped trying to fit into their world of appearances and calculated moves. I'd joined the army straight out of college, partly to escape the family machine, partly because I genuinely believed in service. Sabrina had stayed close to our grandfather, Thomas Whitmore, learning the company's operations, attending board meetings, positioning herself as his heir apparent. Cole had courted her at business conferences, their romance as strategic as any corporate merger. By 30, Sabrina was the public face of Dunn Defense, the young executive everyone wanted to profile. By 34, I was the officer responsible for coordinating shipments of ammunition pallets and MRE cases between forward operating bases. We'd each made our choices. Neither of us had chosen the other's path. After the honor guard fired their final salute, the sharp crack of rifles echoing across the headstones, we were ushered into a reception hall adjacent to the cemetery. The space smelled of furniture polish and strong coffee, with undertones of lilies from the flower arrangements. A long table held pastries that no one seemed interested in eating. Above us, a giant portrait of my grandfather in his Navy uniform stared down like he was still issuing orders from beyond the grave. I found a position near the window and maintained my posture, back straight, hands loosely clasped. Years of inspections and formations had trained my body to stand still even when my mind wanted to run. Across the room, Sabrina worked the crowd like a candidate at a fundraiser. She shook hands with just the right pressure, whispered condolences with perfect timing, accepted compliments on her outfit with gracious humility. Cole stood beside her, smiling at everyone while his eyes tracked the room, calculating who mattered and who didn't. When the family attorney, Mr. Harwick, cleared his throat, the murmur of conversation dropped instantly. He was a thin man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses that constantly slid down his nose. He carried a leather folder that seemed to contain the future of everyone present, pages that would redistribute my grandfather's empire with a few spoken words. "Thank you all for coming," he said, his voice carrying the practiced calm of someone who'd delivered many wills. "Mr. Whitmore left very specific instructions. We'll proceed exactly as he directed." Sabrina's chin lifted slightly. Cole squeezed her hand. I remained still, arms at my sides, watching but not reacting. "To my granddaughter, Sabrina Whitmore Bennett," Harwick began, adjusting his glasses. "I leave controlling interest in Dunn Defense Logistics, as well as the family residence in Wyoming." Gasps and murmurs rose through the room like a wave. Sabrina didn't even pretend surprise. She nodded once, accepting the news with the grace of someone who'd always known this was her destiny. "To Mr. Cole Bennett," Harwick continued, "I leave the Bennett Investment Trust and the vacation property on Lake Tahoe." Cole's smile was small but unmistakably satisfied, the expression of someone whose strategic planning had paid dividends. My stomach tightened. I already knew what was coming. There was nothing left that mattered. Nothing with real value. "And to Captain Riley Whitmore," Harwick said. pausing long enough to make direct eye contact with me across the room. "I leave this." He reached into his leather folder and pulled out a small white envelope. The edges were bent and soft, like it had been carried in someone's pocket for a long time. My name was written across the front in my grandfather's shaky handwriting, the letters uneven but unmistakably his. For a second, no one spoke. Then I heard it. A chuckle from somewhere in the back of the room. Another person snorted, trying to suppress their amusement. By the time I walked forward to take the envelope from Harwick's extended hand, there were outright laughs rippling through the gathered family and friends. Sabrina's voice cut through the noise, smooth and dripping with manufactured sympathy. "Oh, Riley. Grandpa always did say you liked surprises," Cole added, his tone casual and dismissive. "Maybe it's a thank you note for your service." I didn't answer. Years in uniform had taught me to keep my expression neutral, to never let others see when their words landed. I took the envelope carefully, treating it like something that might break if handled roughly. "Go ahead, open it," someone called out, their voice thick with anticipation of further entertainment at my expense. My hands didn't shake, but my heart hammered against my ribs. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a single piece of folded paper and a boarding pass. Alaska Airlines one-way ticket. Destination Helena, Montana. Departure in 36 hours. No return flight. No explanation beyond 6 words. The laughter grew louder, filling the reception hall. "A plane ticket?" Sabrina said, her eyebrows rising in theatrical surprise. "Well, that's different." Cole muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Guess he thought you needed a vacation." More laughter. Someone in the back made a joke about discount inheritance. Another person suggested maybe there was a gift card hidden inside for dinner. Mr. Harwick closed his folder with a definitive snap. "That concludes the reading of the will." "That's it?" I asked, my voice steady but low enough that only Harwick could hear the edge beneath it. He adjusted his glasses one more time. "There is a personal letter for you, Captain, to be opened upon your arrival in Helena." Sabrina tilted her head, her tone shifting to amusement mixed with pity. "A letter waiting at the other end of a one-way ticket. That's actually kind of sweet, in a strange way." Cole smirked. "Maybe it's a job offer at some ranch. You know, something quiet after all those years in the army." I slipped the ticket and paper back into the envelope and tucked it into my uniform jacket pocket. The paper felt light and substantial, but it might as well have weighed 100 pounds. My father would have told me to walk away with my dignity intact. My mother would have told me to see it through, to trust my grandfather's intentions even when they seemed incomprehensible. Both of them were gone now, my father to cancer 5 years ago, my mother to a stroke just 18 months later. All I had was this piece of paper and a room full of people waiting to watch me collapse under embarrassment. I took a step toward the exit. "Enjoy your inheritance," I said to no one in particular, my voice carrying just enough to be heard. Sabrina's smile faltered for half a second. Cole looked like he wanted to say something cutting but couldn't quite find the words. The room's laughter followed me out the door. Outside, the rain had diminished to a light drizzle that felt cleaner than the air inside. My government-issued black shoes splashed through shallow puddles as I crossed the parking lot. My car was a 10-year-old Ford Escape with a dented rear bumper and a cracked taillight I kept meaning to fix. I slid behind the wheel and shut the door, cutting off the sound of voices and laughter that still echoed from the reception hall. I pulled the envelope out again, staring at the boarding pass under the grey light filtering through the windshield. Helena, Montana. I'd been deployed to forward operating bases in Afghanistan and Iraq, had coordinated supply movements through a dozen different states, but I'd never been to Montana. Never had a reason to go there. My leave balance was sitting at 26 days, accumulated over years of rarely taking time off. I had almost a month before the next major logistics rotation at my duty station. Nothing except common sense was stopping me from using that ticket. And common sense had never been my family's particular strength. I started the engine. The windshield wipers squeaked once before finding their rhythm. Through the rain-specked glass, I watched Sabrina's hired car pull away from the curb, its tinted windows hiding whatever expression she wore now that the performance was over. I tapped the boarding pass against the steering wheel, thinking. A one-way flight to a place I'd never been, left by a man who'd never done anything without careful calculation. My grandfather had been a Navy supply officer during Vietnam before building Dun Defense into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. He used to tell me, "You don't move a single crate without knowing exactly where it's going and why." So why send me somewhere with no explanation, no context, no apparent purpose? I didn't know yet. But I was starting to think he'd just moved his last crate, and somehow, inexplicably, that crate was me. I put the car in drive and pulled out of the cemetery parking lot. The GPS provided directions back to Fort Liberty, my current duty station. I had papers to file, a commander to brief about my leave request, and a duffel bag to pack. The rain stopped completely as I merged onto the highway. The sky over Arlington remained grey and flat, but a thin line of light showed on the eastern horizon cutting through the clouds. I kept my eyes on the road and my hands steady on the wheel. Whatever waited for me in Montana, it wasn't going to find me sitting still in a parking lot, paralyzed by confusion or wounded pride. The wipers clicked off as I turned onto the main highway back toward Fort Liberty. My uniform still carried the faint smell of rain and gun oil from the honor guard's rifles at the graveside ceremony. My hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel while my mind worked through the logistics of what had just landed in my lap. One-way ticket, Montana. A letter waiting at the destination. No additional information. I reached my barracks just after noon. Soldiers were moving between buildings, some in PT gear headed to the gym, others in their ACUs coming back from morning duties. My duffel bag still sat beside my bunk from the last field training exercise, the canvas worn but serviceable. I tossed my dress cap onto the bed and sat down long enough to catch my breath. The room was quiet except for the muffled sound of someone's music playing down the hall, and the occasional bark of a drill sergeant's voice from the company area outside. This was my world. Schedules, orders, chain of command, predictable routines. I knew exactly how to navigate this environment, how to succeed within its structure. The envelope in my pocket belonged to an entirely different world, one I'd spent years trying to escape. I took it out again and laid it on my desk. The boarding pass reflected the overhead fluorescent light. Departure time 3:15 p.m. 2 days from now. Destination Helena Regional Airport, Montana. No return flight listed. No hotel reservation. No rental car confirmation. Just a one-way journey into unknown territory. I flipped the ticket over, scanning every inch for additional clues. In the corner, written faintly in pencil, was a number 1967. My heart paused. That was the year my grandfather had served in Vietnam as a young Navy supply officer. He'd told me stories about managing supply chains under fire, about improvising solutions when ships couldn't dock, about the satisfaction of keeping units supplied when everything around them was chaos. But he'd never mentioned Montana in any of those stories. I closed my laptop and stood. In the Army, you learn to take action first and sort out the details during execution. Years of planning convoy movements had drilled that principle into my bones. Overthinking led to paralysis. Movement led to clarity. I walked down the hallway to my battalion commander's office. Major Ferguson looked up from his paperwork, his eyebrows rising slightly at the sight of me still in my Class A dress uniform on a regular weekday. "Captain Whitmore," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Everything go okay at the funeral?" "Yes, sir," I replied, keeping my tone even and professional, requesting 10 days of leave effective immediately. His pen stopped mid-signature. 10 days? That's a significant request during rotation preparation. I have the leave accrued, sir. 26 days on the books. This is a personal matter that requires immediate attention. I didn't elaborate. One of the first things Army life taught you was to provide only the information necessary for a decision. Volunteering additional details often complicated simple requests. He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded slowly. "You've been with this unit for 6 years and you've never taken more than a long weekend. Your performance has been consistently outstanding. Request approved. Just make sure your second-in-command handles the manifest reviews while you're gone." "Yes, sir." "Already planned, sir." Relief mixed with unexpected nervousness in my chest. This was actually happening now. I'd made it real by asking for leave. Back in my room, I opened my wall locker. Inside hung 2 sets of uniforms, a civilian jacket I rarely wore, and on the top shelf, my father's old leather journal from his days as Dunn Defence's chief financial officer. I pulled the journal down and flipped to the last page where I kept important items. A photograph slipped out my grandfather shaking my hand at my commissioning ceremony 7 years ago. His expression in that photo had been unreadable then and remained mysterious now. But his grip had been strong, almost urgent. I tucked the photo back into the journal and set it on my desk. If I was going to Montana on this incomprehensible mission, my father's journal was coming with me. It was one of the few things I had left from him. Packing took less than 20 minutes. 2 changes of civilian clothes, an extra pair of boots, basic toiletries, the journal, and the envelope. My army-issued duffel swallowed everything easily, leaving room to spare. I pulled up my bank account on my laptop. 2,147.63s, not a fortune, but stable. My rent was paid through the end of the month. My car payment was current. This trip made absolutely no financial sense, but then again, joining the army instead of taking a corner office at Dun Defense hadn't made financial sense either. I'd learned to trust decisions that felt right, even when the numbers didn't immediately add up. I picked up my phone and called my mother. She answered on the second ring, her voice soft but alert. "Riley, you made it back from Washington?" "Yeah, Mom." The funeral went as expected. Sabrina got the company and the Wyoming house. Cole got investment accounts and the Lake Tahoe property. A pause. "And you?" "A plane ticket to Montana. One way. And apparently a letter waiting for me when I get there." She didn't sound surprised. "Are you going?" "I don't know yet. It seems." I trailed off, searching for the right word. "Your grandfather never did anything without a reason, Riley." She exhaled slowly, and I could picture her sitting in her small apartment, probably looking out at the garden she tended. "When your father died, Grandpa Thomas called me. He said that someday he would ask something of you. He didn't say what. He just said that when the time came, I should tell you to trust it." I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. "It could be nothing, Mom. It could be some kind of test, or worse, a cruel joke." "It could be. But it could also be something only you can handle. Something only you would understand." Her voice carried no pressure, just steady confidence. "You've built your entire career on logistics, on understanding how to move resources where they're needed. Maybe this is the last strategic move he made, and you're the only person who can see it through." We talked for a few more minutes about ordinary things: her garden, the weather, a book she was reading. When I hung up, I stared at the duffel bag sitting on my floor, packed and ready. My mother was right about one thing. My grandfather had always played the long game, thinking 5 moves ahead when everyone else was focused on the current turn. If he wanted me in Montana, there was a reason that would eventually become clear. The next morning, I went to the logistics office to hand over my current manifests and brief my second-in-command. Sergeant Keller looked up from his computer screen, eyebrows climbing toward his hairline when I told him I was taking leave. "You taking an actual vacation, Mom?" he asked, genuine surprise in his voice. "Something like that," I said, handing him a flash drive with updated convoy schedules. "Make sure the 88 mics get the revised loading procedures. And if Colonel Harris asks about the fuel requisitions, show him the spreadsheet in the red folder." "Yes, Mom." He hesitated. "Everything good?" "Ask me in a week, Sergeant." It came out drier than I'd intended, but he grinned anyway. "Roger that, Ma'am. Enjoy. Whatever you're doing." Word traveled fast on a military base. By lunchtime, half the logistics battalion knew that Captain Whitmore was flying somewhere mysterious and taking actual leave for the first time in recent memory. Let them speculate. I had a boarding pass and a deadline. Everything else was just noise. That night, I pressed my civilian shirt, set my boots by the door, and laid out my jacket. My phone buzzed with a text from Sabrina. "Hope you enjoy your little trip. Try not to get lost out there." I didn't reply. She had no idea what she'd potentially triggered with her mockery at the funeral. She'd gotten what she wanted: the company, the status, the spotlight. What I'd gotten was still undefined, but something in my gut told me it mattered more than anything she'd inherited. Sleep came late and restless. I dreamed of endless rows of shipping containers stacked higher than I could see, all labeled with dates and places I'd never visited. When my alarm went off at 500, I was already awake, staring at the ceiling, running through mental checklists. I showered quickly, dressed in jeans and my civilian jacket, and grabbed my duffel. The barracks hallway was quiet, most soldiers still sleeping before morning formation. I left a note for Sergeant Keller on his desk and walked out to my car while the sky was still dark. Detroit Metropolitan Airport was crowded with business travelers and families when I arrived. No one gave a second glance to the woman with the army duffel in the security line. I bought black coffee and found a seat near the windows, watching planes taxi across the tarmac in the pre-dawn light. Snow flurries drifted across the runway like television static. I pulled the envelope from my jacket pocket one more time. The boarding pass felt heavier now, weighted with decision and commitment. My grandfather's handwriting stared back at me from the address line. I slid it away and opened my father's journal instead, flipping to his last entry. The words were written in his neat block print, Don't let them turn you into something you're not. Stay true to what matters. I closed the journal and took a long sip of coffee. The bitter warmth grounded me. Boarding was called over the intercom. I stood, slung the duffel over my shoulder, and joined the line shuffling toward the gate. The man ahead of me argued with the gate agent about carry-on dimensions. A toddler behind me cried over a lost stuffed animal. Normal problems. Normal lives lived within predictable boundaries. Mine felt anything but normal right now. On the plane, I found my assigned seat near the back. Middle seat, of course. The woman on the aisle was already absorbed in her phone, nails tapping the screen in a steady rhythm. The man by the window wore a faded ball cap embroidered with Career Vet and stared straight ahead with the 1,000-yard gaze of someone revisiting old memories. He nodded once at my jacket when I sat down. A brief acknowledgement between people who'd both served, then closed his eyes. I buckled in, exhaled slowly, and rested my father's journal on my lap. The engines spooled up, a low vibration rising through the floor and seats. The runway blurred past the window, and then Detroit dropped away beneath the wings. Clouds swallowed us seconds later. I glanced at the veteran by the window. His eyes remained closed, but his lips moved silently, like he was reciting something, a prayer. Maybe, or the names of people he'd left behind decades ago. I looked down at my boarding pass again. Montana. 1967, my grandfather's handwriting. My hands stayed steady on the journal, but my heart beat like a drumline during inspection. When the seatbelt sign dinged off, the flight attendant began her drink service. "Anything to drink?" she asked when the cart reached my row. "Water, please." I twisted the cap off the small plastic bottle and took a sip. The cold water jolted me fully awake, washing away the last traces of uncertainty. My grandfather had always told me, never move resources without knowing the route. I didn't know the complete route now, but I was moving anyway. Sometimes that was the only choice that made sense. The plane tilted slightly westward. Sunlight broke through a crack in the cloud layer, illuminating the wing. I adjusted my seat and stared out at the endless expanse of white below. My duffel was secured under the seat in front of me. My father's journal rested on my knees, and the envelope sat safely in my jacket pocket. Whatever waited at the other end of this flight, I was already committed to finding it. No turning back now. The decision had been made the moment I'd walked to my commander's office and requested leave. The plane descended through thin cloud layers, and suddenly a band of pale mountains appeared below, rising like frozen waves from the earth. My seatmate, the career veteran, woke up and rubbed his face. He glanced at the duffel bag visible under my feet. "Army?" he asked quietly. "Yes, sir," I replied, matching his low volume. He nodded once, a small smile crossing his weathered face. "Good work. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. We need people like you." Then he closed his eyes again and leaned back against the headrest. I returned my attention to the window, following the ridgelines of mountains that looked nothing like the rolling Virginia suburbs or the flat expanses around the bases where I'd served. Montana stretched below us wide, empty, sharp-edged. Unforgiving but beautiful. My fingers tightened around my father's journal. This wasn't a conference or a routine training exercise. This was stepping into completely unknown territory with nothing but a boarding pass and trust in a dead man's final instructions. When the wheels touched down at Helena Regional Airport with a jolt that went through my entire body, passengers immediately popped up from their seats, reaching for overhead bins before the plane had even taxied to the gate. I waited until the aisle cleared, then stood slowly, slinging my duffel over my shoulder with the automatic motion of someone who'd moved through airports dozens of times. The career veteran at the window tipped his cap at me as I passed. "Good luck, Captain." "Thank you, sir." "I appreciate that." The terminal was small and functional, a couple of souvenir stands selling Montana-themed merchandise, a coffee counter, and a row of posters advertising outdoor recreation opportunities. Families hugged at the arrival area. Business travelers scrolled through their phones, already working. Nobody paid me any particular attention, which felt oddly comforting. I followed the thin crowd toward the exit, scanning the area for whatever personal letter Mr. Howick had mentioned. That's when I saw him. A man in his late 60s stood near the doors, holding a handwritten sign with my name printed in careful block letters, Captain Riley Whitmore. He wore a black jacket over a plaid flannel shirt, well-worn jeans and boots polished just enough to show he cared about his appearance. His haircut was military short, maintained in the way old soldiers never quite abandon. I walked directly to him. "I'm Captain Whitmore." His face brightened with something between relief and respect. "Ma'am, name's Frank Holden. I served under your grandfather a long time ago. He asked me to meet you here." I stopped short. "You knew my grandfather?" "Sure did. Vietnam era. He was Navy supply, I was Army transport. We crossed paths on joint operations more than once. Stayed in touch ever since. He told me that when the time came, I'd know exactly what to do." Frank reached for my duffel before I could protest, his movements respectful but efficient. "Come on, ma'am. It's a bit of a drive from here." I followed him outside. The air was crisp and dry. Nothing like the humidity I'd left behind on the East Coast. A black SUV sat at the curb, clean and well-maintained. Frank opened the passenger door for me with a small, courteous nod. The interior smelled faintly of leather and coffee. He started the engine and merged smoothly onto a 2-lane highway heading north from the airport. The landscape began to unfold around us, rolling hills. Dense patches of pine trees, snow clinging to north-facing slopes where the sun couldn't reach. The sky stretched impossibly wide, so vast. It felt like someone had removed a roof I hadn't realized was there. I watched the scenery slide past my window. "My grandfather never mentioned you in any of his stories." Frank chuckled, a warm sound. He wouldn't have. Thomas kept most things close to the vest, but he trusted me with certain responsibilities. When he asked me for this particular favor, I said yes without hesitation. "What kind of favor?" "You'll see soon enough, Mom. I promise it'll make sense." He glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "How's the army treating you?" "Fine. Busy. The usual challenges of logistics work." "Logistics officer, right?" "That's what Thomas told me." "Yes. Moving supplies, coordinating shipments, managing inventories." He smiled. "Figures. Thomas always said you had the best head for supply chains of anyone in your family. Said you understood systems the way some people understand music. We drove for over an hour, passing through small towns I'd never heard of, names like Boulder, Basin, Townsend, each with maybe one gas station, a diner with a flickering neon sign, and a handful of residents who probably knew everyone else's business. Frank filled some of the silence with stories about old convoy operations in Vietnam. Nothing dramatic or exaggerated, just the kind of detailed observations that only someone who'd actually moved cargo under pressure would know. The specifics that separate real experience from invented tales. Then he slowed and turned onto a gravel road lined with tall evergreen trees. A metal gate swung open automatically as we approached, revealing a wooden sign, Veterans Renewal Ranch, private property. I leaned forward in my seat, trying to take in everything at once. Beyond the gate stretched a remarkable sight. Low buildings arranged in organized rows, a large training field with obstacle courses, a greenhouse reflecting sunlight, and clusters of small cabins dotting the hillsides. Men and women in work clothes moved purposefully between structures, some carrying tools, others in conversation. Several wore hats with military unit patches I could identify even from a distance. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Frank's hands remained steady on the wheel, his tone matter of fact. "Something your grandfather built for people like us, ma'am. Veterans and their families." We stopped in front of a main lodge constructed from stone and timber, solid and permanent. American flags lined the walkway approaching the entrance, along with POW MIA flags and the Montana state flag. Frank cut the engine and turned to face me. "This is where I leave you for a bit, Captain. Someone's waiting inside who wants to meet you personally." I stepped out onto the gravel, my boots crunching on small stones. The air smelled of pine trees and wood smoke from chimneys. Clean. Pure. Completely different from anything I'd expected. Inside the lodge, the entryway was simple but purposeful. Framed photographs of military units covered one wall. Shelves held books about leadership, transition, and veteran services. A bulletin board displayed job postings from local businesses looking to hire veterans. Everything looked organized, functional, like a military installation stripped of unnecessary bureaucracy. A man stood near the stone fireplace, waiting. Tall, lean, probably in his 60s, with silver hair cut military short. He wore a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked at me with an expression that suggested he'd been expecting me, that my arrival wasn't a surprise, but rather a confirmation of something planned long ago. "Captain Whitmore," he said, his voice steady and warm. "I'm Conrad Whitmore." The name hit me like physical impact. "Whitmore?" "Yes, Mum." He extended his hand. "I'm your uncle. Half-brother to your father." Thomas Whitmore was my father, too. I didn't move for several seconds, processing this information. Then I took his hand. His grip was firm and genuine. "You're telling me my grandfather had another son? That my father had a brother I never knew about?" Conrad nodded once. "He kept our branches of the family separate. He thought it was better that way for reasons that made sense to him at the time. But he never forgot either you or your father. And he certainly never forgot what mattered most." I glanced around the lodge again, seeing it with new understanding. "And this place?" "He built it," Conrad confirmed, gesturing toward the windows. "Every acre of it. 8,000 acres total. This is a comprehensive program for veterans and their families. Job training, counseling services, temporary housing, placement assistance. He funded it quietly through a separate trust structure that had nothing to do with Dunn Defense." My throat went dry. "Why me? Why send me all the way here without any explanation?" Conrad didn't answer immediately. He walked to a wooden desk, opened a drawer, and removed a sealed envelope. This one larger than the boarding pass envelope. This came with very specific instructions. You were to open it only when you arrived here and saw the ranch with your own eyes. He handed it to me. My name again, in my grandfather's increasingly shaky handwriting. The paper felt heavier than it should have, weighted with meaning. I broke the seal carefully and unfolded the letter inside. "Riley, if you're reading this, you made the choice to come. Good. You always understood what service actually means. Your sister and her husband have exactly what they wanted the company. The public recognition, the appearance of success. Here is what actually matters. This ranch is yours now. The land, the programs, the people, the mission. Run it. Grow it. Protect it. These people here are your real legacy. You earned this responsibility by never asking for it, by choosing service over status every single day. Make it better than I could. No signature, just his initials, TW. I read it twice, then lowered the paper slowly. He left this entire operation to me. Conrad nodded. The trust is in your name now, transferred the day he died. We've been keeping everything running smoothly. But he wanted you to take actual control. He wanted you to lead it. I walked to the window and looked out at the training field where a group of veterans was learning carpentry skills, building what looked like the frame of a small structure. A woman in a wheelchair sat nearby with a service dog at her side, laughing at something an instructor said. A child played on a swing set near the greenhouse. The scene was so ordinary and yet so unexpected that it didn't fit any narrative I'd been told about my family or my grandfather. This wasn't about money or power or corporate control. This was about actual work, real impact, sustainable change. Frank appeared in the doorway behind me, cap in his hands. "All set here, Conrad." Conrad smiled faintly. "She's all set." "Welcome home, Captain." I folded the letter carefully and returned it to its envelope. My fingers were steadier now than they'd been on the plane. My grandfather's final strategic move wasn't about stocks or mansions or yachts. It was about this place, these people, this mission. I took a deep breath, the smell of pine and coffee filling my lungs. "All right," I said quietly. "Show me everything. I want to understand exactly what I'm responsible for now." Conrad led me through the lodge's main hallway, which was lined with photographs showing veterans standing next to newly constructed houses, working at welding stations, shaking hands at what looked like graduation ceremonies. Each frame had a small brass plaque underneath with a date and a name. It felt like walking through a living record of actual accomplishment, not publicity stunts or photo opportunities staged for media consumption. My boots made soft sounds on the polished wood floor. The smell of fresh coffee drifted from somewhere deeper in the building, mixing with the faint scent of wood smoke from the fireplaces. We stepped outside through a side door onto a covered porch. Below us stretched the full scope of the property in daylight. To the left stood the training field with obstacle courses and equipment. Straight ahead, several large barns and workshops hummed with activity, the sound of power tools, voices calling instructions, the beep of machinery backing up. To the right, rows of small cabins dotted the hillside, smoke curling from their chimneys into the clear Montana sky. In the distance, the greenhouse glinted in the sunlight next to an array of solar panels. Everywhere I looked, people were working with purpose. Some wore t-shirts with military unit logos. Others wore civilian work clothes. All of them moved with the steady, focused pace of people who had clear objectives and understood their roles. "Your grandfather started this with 10 acres and a single barn," Conrad said as we descended the porch steps. "He built it up slowly over 4 decades, always quietly, never seeking recognition. Most of the staff members here are veterans themselves. Some live on the property while they transition back to civilian life. Others come for specific training programs and leave when they're ready to move forward. I kept my eyes on a group of men and women working together to repair a tractor engine near one of the workshops. Their movements were coordinated, efficient, and no one in the family knew about any of this? He made absolutely sure of it, Conrad replied. Thomas didn't want anyone treating this like a charity project they could put on a resume or use for tax benefits. This was his actual work, the thing that mattered most to him in the final decades of his life. Frank caught up to us, still carrying my duffel. "We've got a guest cabin ready for you, Captain. Whenever you're ready to settle in." We followed a gravel path toward the residential area. Children's voices drifted from a playground near the greenhouse. I passed another bulletin board, this one covered with job listings from local businesses, welding positions, logistics coordination, medical administration, IT support. Someone had tacked up a hand-drawn thank you card from a child, complete with crayon drawings of tanks and helicopters. Most of our residents come from Army and Marine Corps backgrounds, Conrad explained as we walked. Your grandfather understood that soldiers don't stop needing structure and purpose just because they take off the uniform. He wanted to create a place where military skills could translate directly into civilian careers without the usual chaos and confusion that often comes with transition. I stopped at the edge of the training field. A man in his 50s with a prosthetic leg was patiently guiding two younger veterans through a carpentry exercise. His tone firm but encouraging, exactly like a good NCO training new soldiers. The sight affected me more than I'd expected. I'd seen soldiers unload supply pallets in combat zones, had coordinated movements through dangerous territory, but watching veterans build something for themselves, creating their own futures with their hands that felt entirely different, more permanent, more meaningful. Conrad noticed my expression and paused beside me. "He thought you'd understand this immediately," he said quietly. "He told me you understood logistics better than anyone else in the family because you actually cared about where things ended up, not just about moving them from point A to point B." We reached a small cabin with a wooden porch and a hand-carved sign reading Guest 3. Inside was simple but thoughtfully arranged a comfortable bed, a desk with a lamp, a small kitchenette area, and a window facing the hills. Everything I needed, nothing I didn't. Frank set my duffel down near the bed. "If you need anything at all, Mom. I'm usually in the staff office down by the main barn. Just ask anyone and they'll point you in the right direction." "Thank you, Frank. I appreciate everything." He tipped his cap and left, closing the door gently behind him. I sat on the bed and pulled out the envelope containing my grandfather's letter, reading it again with new eyes. "This ranch is yours now. Run it. Grow it. Protect it." The words carried no warmth or sentimentality, but they carried something more valuable: trust. Complete, absolute trust. He hadn't left me a yacht to enjoy or a penthouse to show off. He'd left me a responsibility, a mission that would require everything I'd learned in my military career and probably more. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Conrad stood there holding a stack of thick binders. "I figured you'd want to see the actual numbers and operations details," he said, stepping inside at my gesture. "Budgets, property deeds, the legal structure of the trust, partnership agreements." He laid the binders on the desk. Each one was neatly tabbed and labeled operations, finance, training programs, state partnerships, federal grants, long-term development. This wasn't some casual side project or hobby. This was a fully functioning organization with real resources and real impact. "We've been operating at full capacity for the past 3 years, Conrad said, opening the operations binder to show me organizational charts. "We have contracts with the state for veteran job training programs, private donations from individuals who believe in the mission, and a significant federal grant for transition services. But Thomas always said you'd be the one to take it to the next level." I flipped through the finance binder. Line items showed payroll for 37 staff members, maintenance costs for buildings and equipment, program expenses for training materials and certifications. Every dollar was accounted for and directed toward practical purposes. Nothing flashy or wasteful. "How large is the trust?" I asked. "Approximately $150 million, give or take fluctuations in the land value and investment accounts. The property itself is worth roughly half of that. Everything is completely debt-free. Your sister inherited a company with serious financial problems hidden under a shiny surface. You inherited the only thing your grandfather built that was actually solid. I closed the binder slowly, processing this information. Why didn't he just tell me about this years ago? He wanted you to make a genuine choice, not follow an assignment, Conrad said. He told me if Riley comes, it means she's ready. If she doesn't come, then the timing wasn't right. He trusted you to make the right decision when the moment arrived. Outside, the sound of a power saw started up from one of the workshops. I stood and looked out the window at a group of veterans working together to frame a new cabin structure. One of them noticed me watching and gave a small, casual wave. I waved back automatically. Conrad leaned against the doorframe. We can walk the entire property whenever you're ready. People will want to meet you, but there's no rush. Take your time to adjust. I'm ready now, I said. Let's go. We walked down to the main barn complex. Inside the first building, rows of tools hung neatly on pegboards. Organized by type and size, another barn had been converted into a full mechanic shop where two young veterans were methodically rebuilding an old pickup truck, teaching each other as they worked. In a classroom trailer, a woman wearing a sweatshirt marked USF was teaching a computer skills workshop to 6 students. All veterans, all focused intently on their screens. Every space felt organized and purposeful, like a military base but without the harsh formality and constant barking of orders. One veteran recognized Conrad as we passed and came over, covered in sawdust from whatever project he'd been working on. Sir, just wanted to let you know the lumber delivery for the new cabins arrived this morning. We've already started sorting it. Conrad put a hand on my shoulder. This is Captain Riley Whitmore. She's going to be taking a leadership role here from now on. The man wiped his hand on his jeans and extended it to me. Welcome aboard, Ma'am. Good to have you. I shook his hand firmly. Thank you. Good to be here. He nodded and returned to his work. Simple. Direct. No false praise or awkward deference. These people didn't know me as the granddaughter of a wealthy contractor. They saw me as a captain, another veteran, someone who potentially understood their world. By the time we'd circled back to the main lodge, the sun was dipping behind the western hills, painting everything in shades of orange and purple. Conrad pointed to a framed photograph on the wall near the entrance. It showed my grandfather in his 80s, standing with Frank and several younger veterans, all of them holding a commemorative plaque that read, 5,000th graduate. His face in that photo wasn't the stern, businesslike expression I remembered from family gatherings. He was actually smiling, relaxed, almost at peace. He was different here, Conrad said softly. This was where he could do the work himself. No cameras to perform for, no speeches to make, no shareholders to impress. Just actual service. I traced the edge of the frame with my finger. He never smiled like this at home. Not once that I can remember. Conrad gave a small shrug. He told me once that home was complicated. I think he meant the business, the family expectations, all of that. Here, things were simple. You either helped people or you didn't. You either did good work or you didn't. I turned back toward the window, watching as the cabins lit up one by one as evening settled over the valley. A few veterans gathered at picnic tables outside the dining hall, eating dinner together. A service dog trotted between the tables, tail wagging, accepting pets from multiple people. This wasn't some weekend retreat or feel-good photo opportunity. This was a living, breathing network of people trying to rebuild their lives after service, trying to find their footing in a world that didn't always understand what they'd been through. My grandfather had spent his career building supply chains in war zones and corporate boardrooms. Then he'd built this to supply something entirely different: hope, skills, purpose, community, a future. For the first time since the funeral, my shoulders dropped slightly. The weight I'd been carrying since Arlington, the embarrassment, the confusion, the anger at being mocked started to lift. Conrad checked his watch. There's a staff meeting tomorrow morning at 9. You're welcome to attend, ask questions. Just observe whatever feels right to you. I'll be there, I said immediately. We stood together in the quiet of the lodge. Through the open door, the smell of pine mixed with the distant sound of laughter from the dining area. Someone was playing guitar near one of the fire pits, the chords drifting on the evening air. My grandfather's letter rested in my jacket pocket, the ink pressing against the fabric like a weight I could finally carry without buckling under it. This was real. This mattered. This was everything that Sabrina's inheritance wasn't sustainable, purposeful, built on actual value rather than appearances. Thank you for everything, Conrad, I said. For maintaining this place, for waiting for me, for trusting that I'd come. He smiled. Thomas knew you would. He said, Riley will figure it out. She always does. He was right. Morning sunlight streamed through the cabin window before my phone alarm had a chance to sound. I rolled out of bed, my feet hitting the cool floor, and immediately looked at the envelope on the desk one more time. Last night, I'd read my grandfather's short letter multiple times, but Conrad had hinted there was more longer. More detailed explanation waiting in the office files. I pulled on jeans and a plain long-sleeved shirt, tied my hair back in a simple ponytail, and stepped out into the crisp Montana morning. The hills glowed pale gold in the early light. The smell of wood smoke and fresh coffee drifted from the direction of the dining hall. Frank was already at one of the outdoor picnic tables, sipping from a metal travel mug. "Morning, Captain," he called out. "Staff meeting's at 9 in the main lodge." "I'll be there," I replied, heading toward the dining hall where a window service offered breakfast. The veterans inside nodded as I passed, offering simple greetings. No one stared or whispered. It felt like an odd kind of respect, not because of my family name, but because of the uniform I'd worn for years. At the lodge, Conrad had set up a conference table with binders, a laptop and notepads. Several staff members were already taking their seats, a retired Air Force major who managed the training programs, a former Army medic who handled counseling services, and a quiet woman with an MBA who oversaw the financial operations. Conrad gestured for me to sit near the head of the table. "Everyone, this is Captain Riley Whitmore. Thomas wanted her to understand how this ranch actually functions, so she'll be observing and learning our operations." They each gave brief introductions, then immediately dove into discussing the week's schedule, upcoming supply deliveries, new resident intakes, training program completions, partnership meetings with local businesses. It was refreshingly straightforward. No corporate politics, no attempts to impress or flatter. They just explained what needed to be done and how they planned to do it. As they talked, Conrad slid a thicker envelope across the table toward me, doing it discreetly so as not to interrupt the flow of discussion. "This is the longer personal letter he asked me to hold until you'd seen the ranch for yourself," he said quietly. "It's more detailed. He wrote it about 2 weeks before he died. I waited until the staff meeting wrapped up and everyone had dispersed to their various duties. Then I stepped into a smaller private office off the main room, closed the door and sat at the desk. The envelope was heavier than the first one. I opened it carefully and pulled out 5 pages of lined paper covered in my grandfather's handwriting. The script was shakier than I remembered, but still legible. "Riley," it began, "if you've reached this point, you've already seen what actually matters. You've walked the grounds, met some of the people, begun to understand the scope of what's here. Let me be direct. The family name became a business. The business became a performance. But this ranch is the only thing I built to actually last beyond my lifetime. The only thing I created that will continue to help people long after my name is forgotten. Dunn Defense was designed to impress investors and win government contracts. The ranch was designed to work, to produce real results, to change lives. I watched you choose a commission in the Army instead of a corner office. I watched your father try to keep the company's financial books honest when everyone else wanted to inflate numbers for appearances. I watched Sabrina and Cole treat the business like a stage for their ambitions. I gave them exactly what they wanted: titles, property, control of a company that looks impressive from the outside. They'll either learn the hard truth about what they inherited or they won't. That's their journey now. You, on the other hand, never asked me for anything. You built your own career, made your own choices, proved yourself without using the family name as leverage. So I'm giving you the only thing I created that isn't hollow: this ranch, this mission, these people. Conrad is your uncle, the half-brother your father never had the chance to know. I kept our family branches separate for reasons that seemed important decades ago, but matter less now. Conrad is a good man, and he's been essential in building this place. Trust him. The trust structure is solid. The land, the assets, the partnerships with state and federal agencies, everything is legally sound and financially stable. I've attached detailed documentation about operations, finances, and future development plans. This ranch is not a gift, Riley. It's an assignment. You've already proven you can handle logistics under pressure, that you understand systems and supply chains, that you care about outcomes more than appearances. If you choose to accept this responsibility, use your training. Don't make speeches. Build better systems. Hire good people and give them clear objectives. Serve them before they serve you. That's how you win a war that isn't fought with weapons or contracts. Make this place better than I ever could. You have the skills, the character, and the vision to do exactly that. 2. I folded the letter slowly, feeling the paper's texture against my fingertips. For years, I'd believed my grandfather didn't understand me, that he'd been disappointed by my choice to join the army instead of the family business. Reading his words now, I realized he'd understood me better than anyone else in the family. He'd seen exactly who I was and what I valued. When I stepped back into the main room, Conrad was waiting by the fireplace. "You read it?" "Yes." He nodded. "Then you know what he expected from you." "I do." "Good." He gestured toward the door. "Let's go look at the rest of the operation. You need to understand every part of this if you're going to run it effectively." We walked outside together. On the training field, the carpentry group was beginning to frame walls for a new cabin. A delivery truck had arrived at the main gate, and Frank was coordinating a team to unload lumber. The entire scene looked like a well-run military operation, clear tasks, everyone working efficiently, no wasted motion. Conrad led me to a small administrative office near the greenhouse where files and documents were stored. "Here's all the paperwork officially transferring control to you," he said, handing me a folder. "It's completely legal." Thomas had everything notarized last month, weeks before he died. Inside were property deeds, bank account authorizations, and a set of keys labeled for various buildings across the ranch. There was also a business card with contact information for the ranch's attorney and accountant. Everything was meticulously organized, nothing left to chance or interpretation. I looked up at Conrad. "You've been running this place effectively for years. You could have claimed it for yourself. Why didn't you?" He gave a slight shrug. "Because he wanted it to go to you specifically. He had his reasons, and I agreed with them. My name was never on the trust documents. This was always meant for you." I set the folder on the desk, feeling the weight of actual ownership settling onto my shoulders. "I don't know if I'm ready for this level of responsibility." "You've been ready longer than you realize," Conrad said. "You manage millions of dollars in military assets. You coordinate complex supply movements under pressure. This ranch is fundamentally the same skill set, just applied to a different mission." We walked back outside toward the residential cabins. A woman in a wheelchair rolled past with a service dog walking calmly beside her. She nodded to both of us. Conrad greeted her by name, asking about her progress in a new job placement program. She smiled broadly and gave a thumbs up before continuing on her way. I slowed my pace, taking in more details, the supply sheds organized and labeled by category, training schedules posted on bulletin boards, maintenance logs attached to clipboards at each tool station. Everything reflected the kind of system I would have built myself if given the opportunity. My grandfather had somehow known exactly what I would need and want, and he'd created it before I even knew it existed. Frank approached us with a clipboard. "Morning delivery from Billings just arrived early. Need someone authorized to sign for the shipment." Without hesitation, I took the pen and signed my name on the manifest. It felt completely natural, like taking over a convoy shipment. Frank glanced at the signature and gave me a brief nod. "Welcome aboard, Captain," officially. As the afternoon progressed, Conrad walked me through the financial projections and upcoming projects, a new computer lab to teach IT skills, expansion of the counseling wing to accommodate more residents, and a pilot program partnering with a local construction company to hire graduates directly from the ranch's training programs. Every initiative had clear objectives, realistic budgets, and measurable outcomes. Nothing was designed for publicity or appearances. It was all about actual impact. By the time we reached the porch of my cabin again, the sun had shifted west, casting long shadows across the valley. Groups of veterans were heading to the dining hall for dinner. Children ran between the cabins, their laughter echoing off the hillsides. A guitar started playing near one of the fire pits. The scene felt solid, grounded, real. No yachts or penthouses or headlines, just people working together, rebuilding their lives with dignity and purpose. I stood on the porch holding my grandfather's letter, the trust documents, and the keys to every building on the property. For the first time since the funeral at Arlington, the weight pressing on my chest had transformed from humiliation into genuine responsibility. This was what inheritance actually meant, not receiving things, but accepting the duty to maintain and improve something that mattered beyond yourself. The next morning started before dawn. I laced up my boots and walked the gravel path to the main lodge while mist still wrapped the lower hills. Veterans were already in motion, a group heading toward the greenhouse, Another jogging the perimeter trail, 2 men unloading pallets at the supply shed. It reminded me of a forward operating base coming to life before sunrise. That sense of purposeful activity driven by clear objectives rather than external pressure. Conrad met me on the porch, handing me a clipboard. "Daily operations log," he said. "Thought you'd want to see how things actually run day to day." I scanned the column's names, assigned tasks, time blocks, equipment lists. It was familiar territory, exactly the kind of systematic tracking I'd used for years in military logistics. "This is more organized than some units I've worked with," I observed. "That's intentional," Conrad replied. Thomas believed veterans respond best to clear structure combined with genuine respect. Not pity or charity, but honest expectations and meaningful work. Inside the lodge, staff members gathered around the conference table for the morning briefing. Frank reported on the day's deliveries: lumber for new construction, medical supplies for the health clinic, a shipment of laptops for the new computer lab. The Air Force Major provided updates on training program completions. The medic reported 3 new intakes arriving that afternoon. Each person spoke concisely, no wasted words or unnecessary elaboration. It felt like the kind of efficient military briefing that actually accomplished something. When the discussion turned to me, I stood without overthinking it. "We need a better tracking system for supply usage," I said, pointing at a handwritten log on the table. "At least half of this data could be digitized. You'd save hours of administrative time and reduce errors." Nobody flinched at the suggestion. The finance manager made a quick note. Conrad simply said, "Good observation. Draft a specific plan and we'll implement it." After the meeting, I followed Frank out to the loading area where deliveries arrived. He showed me their current process, checking physical manifests against invoices, handwriting signatures, filing paper copies in a physical cabinet. The system was functional but inefficient. Exactly the kind of workflow bottleneck I'd learned to identify and fix during my military career. "We're not exactly cutting edge with technology here," Frank admitted. "The budget exists for upgrades, but nobody on staff really has IT expertise." "I can fix that," I said. "It's just workflow optimization. Give me a day with your current process and I'll have a better system designed." We spent the next several hours walking the entire property. In the workshop, a former Marine taught welding techniques to 3 younger veterans, his instruction patient but demanding. In the classroom trailer, a veteran in his 20s practiced interview skills with a volunteer career coach. In the counseling wing, a quiet room with comfortable chairs provided space for PTSD support group sessions. Every location functioned like a node in a well-designed supply chain. Input veterans needing specific skills or support. Process structured training or counseling. Output people prepared to move forward with their lives. I could almost see organizational flowcharts forming in my mind, identifying potential improvements and efficiencies. By midday, my clipboard was filled with notes and observations. I ate lunch at one of the long communal tables with staff and program participants. Nobody asked me about mansions or company politics. A young veteran named Tyler told me about learning carpentry after losing his oil field job when his unit deployed. A woman named Carla talked enthusiastically about starting a small trucking company with help from the ranch's small business grant program. Listening to their stories, I realized this place wasn't charity or feel-good volunteering. It was infrastructure systematic, replicable infrastructure for giving people genuine second chances. After lunch, Conrad pulled me aside into a small office near the main barn. "We need to discuss done defense," he said, closing the door for privacy. I sat down, setting my clipboard aside. "What about it?" He opened his laptop and rotated it so I could see the screen. A news article filled the display: "Done Defense Logistics, under federal investigation." Sub-headlines mentioned irregularities in contract billing, missed delivery deadlines, and plummeting stock prices. Comments from anonymous employees described unsustainable spending and poor management decisions. I scanned the article quickly, absorbing the details. "How serious is this?" "Serious enough," Conrad said grimly. "Thomas warned me about this possibility over a year ago. He knew Sabrina and Cole were prioritizing optics over actual operations. The yacht they leased, that's costing them 6 figures annually. The penthouse has 2 separate mortgages. The company is leveraged beyond what's sustainable." I felt something stir in my chest, not satisfaction exactly, but grim recognition. So my grandfather didn't punish me at the funeral. He protected me by keeping me away from that disaster. "Exactly," Conrad confirmed. "Does Sabrina know you're here?" "No," I said. She probably assumes I'm at some army training conference or visiting friends. She hasn't tried to contact me. Let's keep it that way for now, he suggested. You have more than enough to handle here. Without getting pulled into their crisis, I nodded slowly. So while they're losing everything they thought was secure, I'm standing on land that's completely paid for, running programs that actually generate value. That's correct. We returned outside. The sun had burned through the morning mist, revealing the hills in sharp detail. Veterans were finishing their morning tasks and transitioning to afternoon training sessions. I joined a group moving boxes of computer equipment into the new IT lab. Frank handed me a box labeled networking gear. You sure you want to carry that yourself? Captain, he asked with a slight smile. I've carried heavier equipment in Afghanistan, I replied, earning quiet laughter from the group around us. Inside the lab, we unpacked routers, monitors, keyboards, and cables. The Air Force major pointed toward a corner desk. We're hoping to start teaching basic IT skills here next month. You'll get more than basic skills once I have this system properly configured, I said, already mentally designing the network layout. Years of setting up temporary command posts had given me enough technical knowledge to wire a room quickly and efficiently. By late afternoon, the lab was fully functional with networked computers and a clean cable management system. Frank watched me work for a while before commenting. You're making yourself useful pretty fast, Captain. Old habits, I replied, testing the final connection. You don't stop being a logistics officer just because you're not in uniform. When the last equipment box was empty, I stepped outside and wiped my hands on my jeans. The ranch looked different to me now, not just my grandfather's legacy project, but a functioning system that I actually knew how to operate and improve. Conrad walked over from the barn area. Saw another news update, he said quietly. Dun Defense just lost another major contract. The board is calling emergency meetings. I exhaled slowly, watching veterans gather at picnic tables for dinner. Sabrina and Cole wanted the company. They got it. Now they have to manage the consequences. He studied my expression. You don't sound happy about their troubles. I'm not. I looked out toward the residential cabins. I didn't come here to watch them fail. I came because he asked me to build something better. Conrad nodded with understanding. That's exactly why you're the one he chose for this. We stood together in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of hammers from a construction site, the bark of a service dog, the distant laughter of children, the smell of fresh-cut lumber mixed with the crisp mountain air. What's on tomorrow's schedule? I asked. New resident orientation, Conrad replied. 5 veterans arriving. It's a good way to understand the people you're now responsible for helping. I attended the orientation session in a small classroom the next morning. 5 new arrivals sat at folding tables looking tired but alert in the way soldiers always look after a long journey. A staff member explained the program work hours, housing assignments, available support services, expectations for participation. When the staffer introduced me as Captain Whitmore, a few heads turned, but no one asked questions or made assumptions. They were here for their own reasons, focused on their own challenges. Afterward, a man with a faded 101st Airborne patch on his jacket approached me. Ma'am, he said, I heard you're running this place now. Is that accurate? I'm here to make sure it keeps running effectively and grows to help more people, I replied. He extended his hand. Name's Jesse. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. I shook his hand firmly. You're welcome, Jesse. Let's make it count for something meaningful. As evening settled over the ranch, I walked back to my cabin. The envelope with my grandfather's letter lay on the desk next to the trust documents and building keys. Outside my window, porch lights glowed across the property in the gathering darkness. Groups of veterans sat together at picnic tables, eating dinner, talking quietly, sharing their days. The air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of pine and wood smoke. I sat on the bed and took a long, steady breath. For the first time since the funeral, I felt genuinely grounded, not angry or confused or embarrassed. Just clear about what needed to be done. I hadn't planned any of this, but it fit like a uniform tailored specifically for me. My grandfather had handed me a complex puzzle, and I was beginning to see how all the pieces connected. This was real work. This mattered. This was exactly where I was supposed to be. The buzzing of my phone on the desk cut through the pre-dawn quiet of my cabin. I reached for it instinctively, still half asleep, expecting some routine army notification or weather alert. Instead, the screen showed a name I hadn't seen in months, Sabrina Whitmore Bennett. I watched it ring until it went to voicemail. Then it immediately rang again, and again. By the third call, I answered, already knowing this wouldn't be pleasant. Her voice came through fast and frantic, completely different from the polished executive tone she used at public appearances. Riley, we need to talk. Right now. This is urgent. I sat up, already reaching for my boots by habit. You realize it's 5 in the morning here. I don't care what time it is there. This is about done defense. Everything's falling apart. She stopped, and I could hear her breathing hard. The federal contracts. Riley, you know what's happening, don't you? Yes, I said evenly. I've seen the reports. A long pause. Then, softer, almost vulnerable. Why didn't he tell me? Why didn't Grandpa warn me about any of this? You never asked, I said, standing and walking toward the window. Outside, veterans were already starting their morning routine, silhouettes moving against the grey hills turning pink with sunrise. You wanted the company. You got the company exactly as it was. We're drowning here, she said, her voice cracking slightly. Cole doesn't know how to handle this kind of crisis. The board is panicking. We've had to list the yacht for sale. The penthouse is going into foreclosure. Everything's. It's a complete disaster. I kept my eyes on the training field where morning PT was beginning. What do you want from me, Sabrina? Another pause, longer this time. Help, please. I know Grandpa left you something. Cole says it must be some kind of trust fund or property. We can work out a deal, a partnership maybe. I cut her off. This isn't about making deals. What he left me isn't money you can borrow or assets you can leverage. It's about running something real, something sustainable. And you're calling because everything fake is falling apart. Her tone shifted, becoming almost desperate. I don't know what to do, Riley. I'm completely lost here. I'm busy, Sabrina, I said, and ended the call. The phone immediately buzzed with a text. Please call me back. We need you. I set it face down on the desk. A moment later, a knock came at my door. It was Conrad, already dressed for the day. You're up early, he observed, stepping inside at my gesture. Sabrina just called, I said. 3 times. He raised an eyebrow. That didn't take long. What did she want? Help. Money. Some kind of rescue operation for Dunn Defense. She's panicking. What did you tell her? That I'm busy. Conrad gave a small nod of approval. Good. Focus here first. Their crisis isn't your emergency. We walked down to the main lodge together. Staff were already gathering for the morning briefing. Frank gave his usual delivery update, then passed me the clipboard. I reviewed supply movements and training schedules without hesitation, my voice steady as I gave directions. It felt completely natural now, my decisions. People listening and responding. Systems moving forward efficiently. After the meeting, a veteran named Carla stopped me outside. Captain Whitmore, the trucking cooperative wants to expand operations into 2 more counties. They need your signature on the grant application. Bring it to my office after lunch, I said. I'll review and sign it. As Carla walked away, Conrad leaned on the porch railing. You're settling in well. I'm just working, I replied. It's what I know how to do. We headed to the construction site where new cabins were being framed. I grabbed a hammer without asking and joined the crew nailing wall studs into place. One of the younger veterans looked at me with curiosity. You're the boss here, right? I'm a captain, I said, lining up another nail. Right now, I'm a carpenter helping build housing. He smiled and went back to work. We built in companionable silence except for the rhythmic sound of hammers and the occasional called instruction. Sawdust floated in the morning sunlight. This kind of physical work was my preferred therapy: clear objectives, measurable progress, tangible results. During lunch at the dining hall, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Cole. We're desperate. Sabrina's falling apart. Please call us. I showed the text to Conrad. They're not going to stop, I said. They'll keep pushing until I set a clear boundary. That's probably accurate, he agreed. You can choose to let them sink completely, or you can throw them a rope. But if you help them, do it entirely on your terms. After lunch, I went to my cabin office and opened my grandfather's longer letter again, rereading a specific passage. Be kinder than they were to you, but maintain complete control. His handwriting seemed to stare back at me from the page, challenging me to be better than the people who'd laughed at the funeral. I closed the letter carefully and looked at the trust documents spread across my desk. This ranch was secure. The programs were funded. My army leave still had 2 weeks remaining. I had time to make a thoughtful decision about whether and how to help Sabrina and Cole. Another knock at the door. Frank stepped in. Delivery truck from Billings just arrived? Also, 2 local reporters showed up at the front gate asking questions about you. Reporters? I repeated. He nodded. Local news. They apparently heard rumors about a mystery Whitmore running a veteran's ranch. I told them no comment and sent them away. Good, I said. Keep it that way. No media access without my explicit approval. By mid-afternoon, I was helping set up the new computer lab, teaching veterans how to log in, how to use spreadsheet software, how to apply for jobs online. They listened carefully, asking good questions. It reminded me of training soldiers to run inventory management software in forward operating bases, different context. Same fundamental learning process. When the session ended, a young man stayed behind. Ma'am, he said quietly, thank you for doing this. Most people don't treat us like we're capable of learning new things. You're absolutely capable, I said firmly. You just need access to the right tools and training. He smiled and left. I remained in the empty classroom for a moment, hands resting on the desk, thinking about how fundamentally different this felt from the corporate boardroom Sabrina had always craved. No cameras, no manufactured applause, no performance, just actual measurable progress. Walking back toward my cabin as afternoon faded into evening, I checked my phone again. Another voicemail from Sabrina, her voice trembling and almost unrecognizable. Riley, please. Grandpa trusted you. We need guidance. We can't. We can't hold this together much longer. I stood on my cabin porch looking out over the ranch. The hills, the residential cabins, the people moving with purpose and dignity. This was solid ground, real, sustainable. For the first time since the funeral, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply done playing games that didn't matter. Conrad approached along the gravel path, hands in his jacket pockets. Everything okay? They're breaking, I said simply. The facade is crumbling completely. He nodded. Let them experience that. It might be the only way they learn what actually matters. I looked back at the cabins, at the service dogs walking calmly beside their handlers, at the smell of dinner preparations drifting from the dining hall. I'm not certain I want to watch them completely drown. That's your decision to make, Conrad said. But don't sacrifice this place or your mission here to save them from consequences they created. We walked toward the lodge together as the sun dipped low, turning the hills copper and gold. Veterans gathered at picnic tables, laughing, eating, some tossing a football back and forth. The air was cool and steady, carrying none of the storm currently destroying Sabrina and Cole's carefully constructed world. Inside my jacket pocket, my grandfather's letter felt lighter now, like it had shifted from burden to compass, from weight to guidance. A cold wind rolled down from the northern hills as I walked the ranch's perimeter trail at sunrise, my boots crunching steadily on frost-covered gravel. My phone sat heavy in my jacket pocket. Sabrina's voicemails had evolved from frantic to genuinely pleading over the past days. I could have ignored them indefinitely, but my grandfather's words kept returning, be kinder than they were, but maintain control. That wasn't just advice. It was a direct order from someone who'd spent his life making strategic decisions. I cut across the training field toward the main barn where Conrad was reviewing supply receipts with Frank. I've made a decision, I said without preamble. Conrad looked up from his clipboard. Let's hear it. I'm going to offer them jobs here. Real jobs with actual work and real accountability. No executive titles, no stock options, no shortcuts. If they want stability, they can earn it the same way everyone else here does. Conrad's eyebrows rose slightly. That's more generous than they deserve. It's not charity, I said firmly. It's a test. If they can handle the work and contribute meaningfully, they stay. If they can't, they leave. Either way, this place remains intact and continues its mission. He nodded slowly, considering the implications. What specific roles are you thinking? Cole can manage distribution operations for our partnerships. That matches his skill set if he's willing to actually do the work. Sabrina can handle marketing and community outreach, but she starts from zero. No automatic budget, no personal assistant, no special treatment. Conrad pulled out a notepad and started making notes. When do you want to tell them? Now, I said, pulling out my phone. Before I reconsider. I called Sabrina. She answered on the first ring, her voice raw with exhaustion. Riley, I'm going to say this once, Sabrina. Listen carefully. I'm not bailing you out. I'm not giving you money or access to what Grandpa left me. But I will offer you and Cole jobs at the ranch's affiliated operations. Salaries only, no ownership, no executive perks. You'll work under me and Conrad's supervision. No exceptions, no negotiations. Silence stretched across the line. Then a sound that might have been a choked laugh or a sob. "You're serious?" "Completely serious. You show up here by Monday morning. If you're late, this offer disappears permanently." She started, then stopped. "We'll be there." "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is work, not rescue." I ended the call. Conrad raised an eyebrow. That was direct. "They've run out of options," I said. "Now we'll see if they can handle reality." We spent the rest of the day preparing. Frank arranged 2 staff cabins near the employee housing area. The finance manager set up basic payroll paperwork. I drafted job descriptions stripped of all corporate language. Distribution coordinator for Cole, marketing coordinator for Sabrina. No inflated titles, no false authority, just straightforward work descriptions. By afternoon, I was back in the computer lab teaching a group of veterans advanced spreadsheet techniques for inventory tracking. 5 students followed along intently, asking smart questions. Jesse, one of the newer residents, grinned at me across the room. "You run this operation like a field exercise, Mom," he observed. "That's because it essentially is one," I replied. "Just without incoming fire." When the session ended, I walked outside to find a delivery truck arriving with supplies for our small vineyard operation in the valley. I signed the manifest and helped unload crates alongside other staff members. A young veteran named Marcus asked, "Mom, is it true your sister's coming here to work?" "Yes," I said, hefting a box of equipment. "She and her husband are going to work like everyone else here does." He smirked slightly. "I bet that'll be interesting for them." "That's their challenge to handle," I said. Dinner that night at the communal dining hall buzzed with quiet conversation. News had spread about Sabrina and Cole's impending arrival. Veterans whispered, but no one seemed particularly surprised or concerned. This was a place built entirely on second chances and redemption through work. 2 more people showing up to rebuild their lives fit perfectly within that framework. The following day, I spent the morning with Conrad touring the distribution warehouse adjacent to the ranch property. Pallets of wine bottles from our vineyard operation were stacked neatly, each labeled with shipping destinations: Denver, Seattle, Portland, Dallas. Forklifts hummed efficiently in the background, moving product with practiced precision. "Cole will start here," I said, gesturing at the operation. "He needs to understand our actual product and supply chain before he can contribute meaningfully to distribution planning." "He's going to hate it initially," Conrad predicted. "Good," I replied. "That means it's probably exactly what he needs." After lunch, I set up a simple workspace in a small office for Sabrina: a basic desk, a functional chair, a laptop. On the wall, I pinned a corkboard with flyers from local community events where our programs had been featured. No corner office, no designer furniture, no view. Just a job. Frank walked in carrying supplies. "Cabins are ready for them," he reported. "They're flying in tonight. Should I meet them at the airport?" "Yes." "And Frank, no special treatment. They get the same welcome everyone else receives." "Understood, ma'am." That evening, as the sun dropped behind the western hills, a dark SUV rolled up the gravel road toward the main lodge. I stood on the porch with Conrad and Frank, watching. The vehicle stopped and the doors opened. Sabrina stepped out first, dressed simply in jeans and a plain sweater. No designer clothes, no jewelry except a watch. Cole followed, his usual confident demeanor noticeably subdued. They both looked around slowly, taking in the cabins, the hills, the smell of wood smoke from evening fires. Sabrina spotted me and walked up the porch steps. "This place is huge," she said quietly, genuinely surprised. "It's a functional working ranch," I replied. "Not a resort or retreat center. You'll find your assigned cabins over there." I pointed. "Tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock sharp. You both attend orientation with other new staff members." Cole tried to smile, but it didn't quite work. "Orientation?" "Everyone goes through it," I said firmly. "No exceptions. Welcome aboard." Frank led them toward their cabins, their footsteps crunching on gravel. Conrad stood beside me, arms crossed. "You sure about this?" "Yes," I said. "They need to experience reality they can't buy or manipulate. This is it." We returned inside the lodge. Staff members glanced up briefly from their evening work, then returned to their tasks. No one gawked or whispered. It was simply another day at the ranch, another set of people arriving to work. Later, walking back to my cabin, I heard the distant sound of Sabrina and Cole moving into their quarters, suitcases rolling across gravel, quiet conversation drifting on the evening air. For the first time in their adult lives, they were stepping into an environment where their family name opened no doors and commanded no deference. Inside my cabin, I sat at the desk and reread the final lines of my grandfather's letter, "Serve them before they serve you." That's how you win a war that isn't fought with weapons. I folded it carefully and returned it to my pocket. Tomorrow would bring more work for everyone, including Sabrina and Cole. Whether they could handle it remained to be seen. But I'd given them a genuine chance. What they did with that opportunity was now entirely up to them. Dawn broke cold and sharp over the Montana hills as I headed to the main lodge, my boots leaving prints in the frost. My alarm had gone off at 5:30, but I'd already been awake, mentally preparing for the day ahead. The smell of coffee and wood smoke drifted from the dining hall. Out on the training field, veterans were stretching, beginning their morning routines. Two new faces, Sabrina and Cole, stood awkwardly near the picnic tables, holding clipboards, clearly waiting for someone to tell them what to do. They looked like brand new recruits on their first day of basic training, stripped of rank and certainty. I walked past without slowing my pace. "Orientation starts at 700 hours sharp," I said. "You're on the schedule like everyone else." Sabrina nodded quickly. Cole muttered something about not being a morning person, but he fell in line. Frank ran them through the complete new employee briefing work hours, safety protocols, reporting procedures, expectations for performance. No shortcuts, no executive privileges, no special accommodations. They'd be rotating through different operations for 2 weeks before settling into their permanent assignments. Sabrina would shadow the marketing staff, learning to handle social media for actual community events rather than staged photo opportunities. Cole would work in the distribution warehouse, learning our supply chain from the ground-up inventory management, trucking logistics, client relations. A cold wind rolled down from the northern hills as I walked the ranch's perimeter trail at sunrise, my boots crunching steadily on frost-covered gravel. My phone sat heavy in my jacket pocket. Sabrina's voicemails had evolved from frantic to genuinely pleading over the past days. I could have ignored them indefinitely, but my grandfather's words kept returning, "Be kinder than they were, but maintain control." That wasn't just advice, it was a direct order from someone who'd spent his life making strategic decisions. I cut across the training field toward the main barn where Conrad was reviewing supply receipts with Frank. "I've made a decision," I said without preamble. Conrad looked up from his clipboard. "Let's hear it. I'm going to offer them jobs here. Real jobs with actual work and real accountability. No executive titles, no stock options, no shortcuts. If they want stability, they can earn it the same way everyone else here does." Conrad's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's more generous than they deserve." "It's not charity," I said firmly. "It's a test. If they can handle the work and contribute meaningfully, they stay. If they can't, they leave. Either way, this place remains intact and continues its mission." He nodded slowly, considering the implications. "What specific roles are you thinking?" "Cole can manage distribution operations for our partnerships. That matches his skill set if he's willing to actually do the work. Sabrina can handle marketing and community outreach, but she starts from zero. No automatic budget, no personal assistant, no special treatment." Conrad pulled out a notepad and started making notes. "When do you want to tell them?" "Now," I said, pulling out my phone. Before I reconsider, I called Sabrina. She answered on the first ring, her voice raw with exhaustion. "Riley, I'm going to say this once, Sabrina. Listen carefully. I'm not bailing you out. I'm not giving you money or access to what Grandpa left me. But I will offer you and Cole jobs at the ranch's affiliated operations. Salaries only, no ownership, no executive perks. You'll work under me and Conrad's supervision. No exceptions, no negotiations." Silence stretched across the line. Then a sound that might have been a choked laugh or a sob. "You're serious? Completely serious? You show up here by Monday morning. If you're late, this offer disappears permanently." She started, then stopped. "We'll be there. Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. This is work, not rescue." I ended the call. Conrad raised an eyebrow. That was direct. "They've run out of options," I said. "Now we'll see if they can handle reality." We spent the rest of the day preparing. Frank arranged 2 staff cabins near the employee housing area. The finance manager set up basic payroll paperwork. I drafted job descriptions, stripped of all corporate language, distribution coordinator for Cole. Marketing coordinator for Sabrina. No inflated titles, no false authority. Just straightforward work descriptions. By afternoon, I was back in the computer lab teaching a group of veterans advanced spreadsheet techniques for inventory tracking. 5 students followed along intently, asking smart questions. Jesse, one of the newer residents, grinned at me across the room. "You run this operation like a field exercise, ma'am," he observed. "That's because it essentially is one," I replied. "Just without incoming fire." When the session ended, I walked outside to find a delivery truck arriving with supplies for our small vineyard operation in the valley. I signed the manifest and helped unload crates alongside other staff members. A young veteran named Marcus asked, "Ma'am, is it true your sister's coming here to work?" "Yes," I said, hefting a box of equipment. "She and her husband are going to work like everyone else here does." He smirked slightly. "I bet that'll be interesting for them." "That's their challenge to handle," I said. Dinner that night at the communal dining hall buzzed with quiet conversation. News had spread about Sabrina and Cole's impending arrival. Veterans whispered, but no one seemed particularly surprised or concerned. This was a place built entirely on second chances and redemption through work. 2 more people showing up to rebuild their lives fit perfectly within that framework. The following day, I spent the morning with Conrad touring the distribution warehouse adjacent to the ranch property. Pallets of wine bottles from our vineyard operation were stacked neatly, each labeled with shipping destinations: Denver, Seattle, Portland, Dallas. Forklifts hummed efficiently in the background, moving product with practiced precision. "Cole will start here," I said, gesturing at the operation. "He needs to understand our actual product and supply chain before he can contribute meaningfully to distribution planning." "He's going to hate it initially," Conrad predicted. "Good," I replied. "That means it's probably exactly what he needs." After lunch, I set up a simple workspace in a small office for Sabrina, a basic desk, a functional chair, a laptop. On the wall, I pinned a corkboard with flyers from local community events where our programs had been featured. No corner office, no designer furniture, no view. Just a job. Frank walked in carrying supplies. "Cabins are ready for them," he reported. "They're flying in tonight. Should I meet them at the airport?" "Yes. And Frank knows special treatment. They get the same welcome everyone else receives." "Understood, ma'am." That evening, as the sun dropped behind the western hills, a dark SUV rolled up the gravel road toward the main lodge. I stood on the porch with Conrad and Frank watching. The vehicle stopped and the doors opened. Sabrina stepped out first, dressed simply in jeans and a plain sweater. No designer clothes, no jewelry except a watch. Cole followed, his usual confident demeanor noticeably subdued. They both looked around slowly, taking in the cabins, the hills, the smell of wood smoke from evening fires. Sabrina spotted me and walked up the porch steps. "This place is huge," she said quietly, genuinely surprised. "It's a functional working ranch," I replied. "Not a resort or retreat center. You'll find your assigned cabins over there," I pointed. "Tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock sharp. You both attend orientation with other new staff members." Cole tried to smile, but it didn't quite work. "Orientation?" "Everyone goes through it," I said firmly. "No exceptions. Welcome aboard." Frank led them toward their cabins, their footsteps crunching on gravel. Conrad stood beside me, arms crossed. "You sure about this?" "Yes," I said. "They need to experience reality they can't buy or manipulate." "This is it." We returned inside the lodge. Staff members glanced up briefly from their evening work, then returned to their tasks. No one gawked or whispered. It was simply another day at the ranch, another set of people arriving to work. Later, walking back to my cabin, I heard the distant sound of Sabrina and Cole moving into their quarters, suitcases rolling across gravel, quiet conversation drifting on the evening air. For the first time in their adult lives, they were stepping into an environment where their family name opened no doors and commanded no deference. Inside my cabin, I sat at the desk and reread the final lines of my grandfather's letter, "Serve them before they serve you." That's how you win a war that isn't fought with weapons. I folded it carefully and returned it to my pocket. Tomorrow would bring more work for everyone, including Sabrina and Cole. Whether they could handle it remained to be seen. But I'd given them a genuine chance. What they did with that opportunity was now entirely up to them. Dawn broke cold and sharp over the Montana hills as I headed to the main lodge, my boots leaving prints in the frost. My alarm had gone off at 5:30, but I'd already been awake, mentally preparing for the day ahead. The smell of coffee and wood smoke drifted from the dining hall. Out on the training field, veterans were stretching, beginning their morning routines. 2 new faces, Sabrina and Cole, stood awkwardly near the picnic tables, holding clipboards, clearly waiting for someone to tell them what to do. They looked like brand new recruits on their first day of basic training. stripped of rank and certainty. I walked past without slowing my pace. Orientation starts at 700 hours sharp, I said. You're on the schedule like everyone else. Sabrina nodded quickly. Cole muttered something about not being a morning person, but he fell in line. Frank ran them through the complete new employee briefing work hours. Safety protocols, reporting procedures, expectations for performance. No shortcuts, no executive privileges, no special accommodations. They'd be rotating through different operations for 2 weeks before settling into their permanent assignments. Sabrina would shadow the marketing staff, learning to handle social media for actual community events rather than staged photo opportunities. Cole would work in the distribution warehouse, learning our supply chain from the ground-up inventory management, trucking logistics, client relations. When they saw me approaching, they gave small nods and continued working. The change in them over the past months had been gradual but unmistakable, from entitled executives to genuinely contributing team members. Conrad joined me near the stage. "Never thought I'd see this day," he said quietly. "Neither did I replied. "But here we are." At 9 o'clock sharp, guests began arriving. State officials, local business owners who partnered with our job placement programs, veterans' families, and a carefully vetted group of reporters who'd been explicitly told this was about the work, not photo opportunities or political statements. My mother arrived quietly, wearing a simple dress. She hugged me without speaking, then found a seat near the front. Frank signaled that we were ready to begin. I walked to the microphone, feeling the weight of my grandfather's letter in my jacket pocket. I didn't give an elaborate speech or engage in self-congratulation. This centre exists because the people here understand what it means to start over, I said simply. Today we're opening expanded space where more veterans can access training, counselling and genuine support as they transition. That's all. This is functional space for important work. Then I stepped back. The crowd applauded, brief and sincere, not performative. No standing ovation, no camera flashes, just hands clapping in genuine appreciation. Afterward, groups toured the new classrooms and workshops. One room contained welding stations with modern equipment. Another had computers ready for IT certification training. A third space was designed for small business development coaching. Every area built for practical use, not appearances. Sabrina led a group of local reporters through the facility, explaining our partnership model with area businesses clearly and without corporate jargon. She sounded professional but authentic, no longer performing for cameras, just communicating genuine information. Cole showed a logistics manager from Helena our distribution operations, explaining how the vineyard production connected with veteran employment and regional economic development. He spoke with actual knowledge earned through months of hands-on work. I moved through the spaces quietly, observing and listening. Veterans explained programs to visitors without scripts or coaching. Children ran between tables eating cookies, the smell of fresh paint mixed with coffee and sawdust. It felt like something built to last because it was designed for function rather than recognition. By midday, the formal portion had ended. People sat at picnic tables eating simple sandwiches and continuing conversations. My mother found me near the greenhouse. "You've built something real here," she said quietly. "I didn't build it alone," I replied. "Grandpa started it. Conrad maintained it. I'm just helping it grow." She smiled faintly. "Your grandfather knew exactly what he was doing when he sent you that plane ticket." We walked together toward the new centre. Sabrina was deep in conversation with a group of female veterans about social media strategies for non-profit outreach. Cole was helping load boxes into a delivery van, coordinating with the driver about route logistics. They didn't look like disgraced executives anymore. They looked like staff members, useful, contributing, grounded. Later in the main lodge, Conrad handed me a folder. "Financial projections for the next expansion phase," he said. "We're actually under budget. If you want to start the Colorado site next year, we have the resources. Let's consolidate this location first," I said. "Make sure everything here is sustainable before expanding." He chuckled, practical as always. As evening approached and guests departed, the ranch settled back into its regular rhythm. I found Sabrina on the lodge porch, sitting with a mug of tea, watching the sun drop toward the western peaks. "You did good work today," I said, sitting in the chair beside her. She gave a quiet laugh. "I didn't really do anything. The programs and the people did everything." "That's the point," I said. "Good systems don't need heroes or stars. They need people who contribute without requiring spotlights." She looked at me, her eyes clearer than I'd seen them in years. I was wrong about everything. The company, the lifestyle, what Grandpa valued, all of it. I'm not here for apologies, Sabrina. I know. She paused. But I want to stay. Cole does too. We're learning things we should have learned decades ago. That's your choice, I said. There's meaningful work here if you want it. No titles, no special treatment, just contribution. Her eyes filled briefly, but she blinked it away. Thank you for not giving up on us. Cole emerged from the warehouse, wiping his hands on a work rag. Delivery trucks are all loaded for tomorrow's routes, he reported, his tone professional and satisfied. He looked at me. We're not going back to New York. That life is over for us. We're done with all that. Good, I said simply. We stood together on the porch as the sun painted the hills gold and amber. Veterans gathered at the fire pit, some playing guitars, others talking quietly. Service dogs moved calmly between groups. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke. My mother joined us, leaning on the railing. He would have liked seeing this, she said softly, meaning my grandfather. I reached into my pocket and touched the folded letter, worn soft from being carried daily. He would have liked that you're all here working together. The four of us stood in comfortable silence as twilight deepened. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation with tears and grand speeches. It was just family members standing on the same porch, finally moving in the same direction for the first time in years. Inside the lodge, staff cleared tables from the day's event. Frank walked past carrying leftover supplies. Good day, Captain, he said simply. Good day, I agreed. Later, back in my cabin, I opened the trust documents one more time. Not because I doubted anything, but because the numbers and structures now represented something living and dynamic rather than static inheritance. This wasn't just property or financial assets anymore. It was an operational mission with real impact, sustained by people who chose to contribute rather than extract. Outside my window, the hills stood dark against the star-filled sky. Lights glowed from the new training center and residential cabins. The smell of sawdust still lingered in the cool air, evidence of work completed and new beginnings. Tomorrow would bring more tasks, more shipments, more training sessions. The rhythm of meaningful work that never really stopped because it served purposes larger than any individual. The Montana morning arrived a full year later with familiar crispness. Frost clung to the grass near the training field as the first delivery trucks rolled through the main gate. I stood on the porch of the Whitmore Veterans Renewal Center, coffee in hand, wearing my Army Reserve uniform for weekend duty. The ranch had transformed substantially since that first uncertain visit. 2 new residential buildings now stood where there had been empty hillside. A small daycare center for veterans' children operated near the playground. A second greenhouse produced food year-round. The Colorado satellite location Conrad had mentioned was now 3/4 complete, with veterans from our Montana program leading the construction. Inside the lodge, the walls displayed updated photographs of graduates, hundreds of them, now holding vocational certificates, shaking hands with new employers, standing proudly in front of businesses they'd started with our support. The bulletin board near the entrance showed job placements across 15 states. Next to it hung my grandfather's original letter in a simple frame. No elaborate display, just his words preserved where people could read them. Veterans sometimes stopped to look at it, but nobody made speeches about it. I walked through the main hall, greeting familiar faces. Sabrina sat at her desk with 2 marketing staff members, finalizing a social media campaign that had actually increased volunteer applications and community donations. She wore practical work clothes and kept her hair pulled back simply. Her transformation from corporate executive to functional team member had been complete and apparently permanent. Cole was already at the distribution hub supervising a wine shipment to a new client in Texas. He'd learned to maintain accurate manifests, negotiate fair trucking contracts, and run financial projections without hiding inconvenient numbers. He took genuine pride in his work, now not for recognition, but for the satisfaction of doing things properly. Conrad met me by the coffee station. Got word from the Colorado team this morning, he said. They're ahead of schedule. The early snow didn't slow them down at all. That's excellent news, I replied. We'll send additional materials next week to keep momentum going. We stepped outside together. The air carried the familiar scent of pine and diesel fuel. Children's laughter drifted from the playground area. A service dog trotted past, tail wagging contentedly. You realize you've built something people are starting to replicate across the country, Conrad observed. 2 senators called last week asking for operational details. The VA wants to study our transition model. I shrugged slightly. Let them copy whatever works. More veterans helped means we're succeeding. He smiled. Thomas would say you just achieved checkmate. He'd say keep moving the pieces, I corrected. The mission never ends. A group of veterans approached, one carrying a wooden plaque. Captain Whitmore, we wanted to give you this for the anniversary, their spokesperson said. The plaque was simple wood with the ranch logo burned into it and words underneath service over status. I ran my fingers across the engraving, genuinely moved. Thank you. But this belongs to all of us, not just me. They grinned and returned to their work assignments. I stood holding the plaque, watching the ranch operate with the smooth efficiency of a well-designed system. Kids playing, dogs working alongside their handlers, forklifts moving supplies, hammers ringing from construction sites. The entire operation functioned like a living organism, with no single person at its center. That was exactly the point. Later that day, I drove down to the vineyard operation in the valley to check on production. Rows of grapevines stretched under pale sunlight, their leaves beginning to show autumn colors. Our Italian vineyard manager, Marco, waved from a tractor. Inside the winery building, oak barrels lined the walls, filling the air with the rich scent of fermenting wine. We walked through the storage area together, checking inventory levels and quality. American distribution is completely stable now, Marco reported. Cole's doing solid work. Never thought I'd say that about someone from his background. But he's earned it. I nodded. He needed a real mission. Now he has one. Back at the ranch that evening, I walked past the fire pit where Sabrina sat with several female veterans, planning an outreach program for women transitioning out of military service. Cole was on his phone not scrolling social media, but coordinating a delivery schedule with a regional distributor. Conrad worked in the office reviewing grant applications for expanded programming. Frank supervised evening equipment maintenance. Jesse, one of our earlier graduates, had returned as a paid instructor, teaching carpentry to new arrivals. Nobody looked to me for constant direction. They simply worked within the systems we'd built together. It felt like a military unit that had achieved full operational capability, sustainable, disciplined, adaptable. In my cabin that night, I looked at the original envelope containing that first plane ticket, now preserved in a small frame on my shelf. Next to it stood the last bottle of wine my grandfather had personally produced before his death. Labeled Eredità 2024 Italian for Inheritance, underneath the label in his shaky handwriting for Riley, who understood that the best inheritance isn't what you're given, but what you're trusted to continue. I poured a small glass from a current vintage and sat at my desk. Outside the window, the hills glowed orange in late sunset. The sounds of the ranch drifted in voices, laughter. A dog barking once, the distant rumble of a truck. I thought about that day at Arlington when people had laughed as I held a wrinkled envelope. They'd assumed it was worthless. It had contained everything. When Frank Holden first held up that sign at the Helena airport with my name on it, 6 words had been about to change everything your grandfather built this for you. Not a yacht, not a penthouse, not empty status symbols. A mission, a purpose. A legacy built on actual service. The weight of that responsibility no longer felt burdensome. It felt steady, sustainable, meaningful. I took a sip of wine and looked at the photograph of my grandfather in his Navy uniform, pinned above my desk. In my memory, he was always smiling here at the ranch, never at corporate headquarters, never at family gatherings, only here where the work was real. A knock at the door interrupted my reflection. It was Sabrina. We're having dinner outside tonight. Everyone's gathering. Will you join us? Be right there, I said. She paused at the doorway. Thank you. For everything. For not abandoning us when you had every reason to. I nodded. Thank Grandpa. I just followed his orders. She smiled and left. I sat for one more moment, then stood and slid the framed letter back into my jacket pocket like a compass I'd learned to navigate by. Outside, the sky blazed with stars undimmed by city lights. People were gathering at the fire pit, guitars emerging, voices mixing in conversation. The smell of grilled food drifted on the cool mountain air. It was just another evening at the ranch, steady, purposeful, real. I walked toward the group, my boots solid on gravel, my shoulders relaxed. No speeches needed. No headlines required. No games left to play. Just the work, the land, and a community rebuilt one task at a time. Standing by the fire with veterans, staff members, Sabrina and Cole around me, I realized there was nothing dramatic left to say. The ranch wasn't a symbol or a plot twist anymore. It was simply a place where people did meaningful work, earning dignity and purpose one day at a time. My grandfather hadn't left me hidden wealth or corporate power. He'd handed me a living system and trusted me not to destroy it. That wrinkled envelope everyone had mocked at the funeral had transformed into a place where soldiers, families, and even my own sister could genuinely start over. Looking at the faces illuminated by firelight, I understood this was the real inheritance my grandfather had intended, not assets to possess, but a mission to serve. Service over status, trust over titles, the quiet satisfaction of building something designed to last beyond yourself. The Montana stars shone brilliant overhead. Tomorrow would bring more deliveries, more training sessions, more challenges to solve. The work would continue because the work always continued when it mattered. But tonight, surrounded by people who'd found their footing here, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, complete certainty that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. My grandfather's final strategic move hadn't been about punishing Sabrina or elevating me. It had been about ensuring that something real, something that actually helped people, would continue long after he was gone. I'd received a plane ticket when I expected an inheritance, but that ticket had led me to something far more valuable than money or property. It had led me home.